It's set to become one of Netflix's most popular shows of all time, with 54 million views since its debut on April 11th.
Yeah, it was inspired by real-life stalking experience of its creator and star Richard Gadd. Baby Reindeer has sent audiences into a frenzy searching for the real-life people that inspired the characters, particularly the stalker Martha.
Now the alleged real-life Martha is revealing her identity for the first time. Fiona Harvey is to set the record straight in an interview with Piers Morgan, which will be released later today.
And she's had a couple of chats with some of the newspapers as well, hasn't
Yeah.
she? But why has the show captured all of our attention of so many people across the world? Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Shoham Das is here to discuss it now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Have you watched it?
Absolutely, yeah. Captivated right from the start.
And what is it then specifically? Because we've watched it, we've had Richard on the show. It was fascinating meeting him and talking to him. But what is it that's caught our attention so it's implicitly?
Well, I think that everybody's fascinated by stalking itself because we all think that we potentially could be a victim of stalking. And a lot of people, especially young women, have had unwanted sexual attention. So I think that's one of the reasons. I also think that the show itself it really draws you in, doesn't it? It's atypical. So you've got a male victim, and you've got somebody who's actually accepting responsibility, at least for part of what happened.
Yes.
And for me personally, I'm one of these guys that, starts all these Netflix programmes, but I don't necessarily stick with them. But this one had me hooked because it's more than just what it seems on the surface. It's not just about the stalking behaviour. You go into the backstory of Richard Gadd himself, or the character, the version of him in the show, and he explains some of his previous experiences, some of his abuse, so you understand why he did some of what he did.
Well, when he came on the show, that was one of the things that was so interesting about it, and I think why the show has done so well as well, is he made all the characters not black and white. There were grey areas. There were moments where he felt desperately sorry for the character Martha, and there were other moments where he felt incredibly frightened. It was a real kind of mixture of everything, just like real life.
Yeah, and it's more exciting. It's more realistic if people are, if they have areas of grey. Not everything in life is black and white.
Absolutely. In real life, we're all grey.
So if you have individuals that are not fully good or not fully bad, then it just makes for a more interesting kind of show, I guess.
Yeah.
One of the things that happened, of course, when the show was aired, people started to try and put the pieces together to work out who the characters were that Richard is talking about, because it's inspired by real-life events. So the TV producer that sort of assaulted him, various other characters, then, of course, Martha, the stalker. And we've now seen that Fiona Harvey has come out, who claims to be the stalker or the character in the programme.
Martha.
And I think she's sort of come out and said it wasn't as he's portrayed me, and is now doing an interview. She's done one with Piers, which is going to be on his YouTube channel tonight. She's done one with the Daily Record as well in Scotland. How do you feel about the fact that she's now having her opportunity to share her side of the story? We know that there has been mental health problems for her in the past. Is this the right sort of environment for her to be able to do that?
I do wonder whether she's got a choice. It feels like she's already been outed. People have already hunted her down on social media. So from her perspective, it's probably damage control. So she wants to put her version of events out. So she probably sees things from a very different perspective. She might, in her own mind, think that she had a normal relationship. She might think that her dirty laundry's kind of been aired out anyway, so I might as well give my side of the story.
I mean, but within all that, there are no parameters and rules. Surely we should be taking more care of people and their mental health.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's a balance, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you could argue that you want to make this show as accurate as possible.
Yeah.
You want to keep it, factually authentic. But on the other hand, you could say that the writers of the show or the platforms have a responsibility to protect all the individuals, even if they are the perpetrator. So it's a balance of getting those two things right.
I think, as you said, though, Kat, there was a real nuance to how Richard portrayed himself in the series, whereby there was a sort of a mutual dependency at times between him and the stalker. There was undoubtedly an attraction in some ways. He needed the attention at certain points within it.
At the gigs, when she laughed. But he also said, I don't want anybody to look for this person. Yeah. He made that very obvious as well, and he was actually concerned about her mental health too.
But we've talked about this, everybody we love true crime, we love being super sleuths. The idea that there is actually somebody that we could put the pieces together and be the detectives to find that person, very naive of him to think that people weren't going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever, you know, we've got the internet at our disposal.
So connected.
People advertise their lives on social media, so it's really easy for any individual to do their own research, to dig up some dirt. So I think it's a bit naive to assume that that wasn't going to happen. But I'd also say that it can be a force for good. You know, sometimes people who try and solve these crimes, these armchair detectives, they form like a sense of community. And that other Netflix show, Don't F With Cats, that was actually, the crime was solved because of exactly this, of these internet sleuths.
The stalking rates are sort of exponentially growing at the moment, the reports of stalking. I wonder if you can offer any sort of advice, because there may be people watching this morning who are experiencing unwanted attention and aren't really sure, because one of the things that Richard certainly found when he initially reported this was it wasn't taken very seriously at all.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is that if you think that you're in immediate danger, then obviously you should be going immediately to the police. Unfortunately, most people fall into a category that's not quite as intense as that, but they still feel unnerved. And I think in that situation, my advice would be to get as much evidence as you possibly can. Because as in Baby Reindeer, unfortunately, sometimes the police are not really that interested. They don't take it that seriously. So what you need to do is build up the evidence. You need to be taking screenshots of social media chats. You need to be taking photos if you think you're being followed, so that if and when the police do come to help, you can give them the tools that they need. And the other thing that I would suggest, and it's maybe a little bit difficult for some people, is to tell other people if you feel comfortable, right? So if you tell your friends and your families and your work colleagues and your neighbours about this individual that's following you, making you feel uncomfortable, they might be vigilant on your behalf, and they might, you know, challenge your potential stalker, and this might deter their actions.
Can stalkers be rehabilitated?
I was just about to
It's a complicated question. And it kind of depends on the motivation, right? So if you've got somebody, for example, that's fueled by mental illness, then in theory you can rehabilitate that. You can treat that with antipsychotic medication, for example. If it's somebody that was previously in a domestic abusive relationship, you could challenge their misogynistic views through rehabilitation. But I think I have to make the point that you can't force rehabilitation onto somebody. They have to have the openness and the insight to actually want to change.
Fascinating stuff, isn't it?
It's going to be interesting to see what happens from here on in. I've got a feeling this isn't going to be the end of it.
No, for sure.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you so much.